I hadn't even taken off my shoes when I heard her voice float from the kitchen. I mean, she's nice and all, but this place feels like ours now. She's basically just a guest, right? My daughter-in-law, Clara, laughing, sipping from a stemless wine glass, her words carelessly sharp, like someone tossing knives without checking if anyone's still in the room. I stood frozen in the entryway, one hand still on the doorknob. The same doorknob my late husband Arthur replaced himself when we bought this house 32 years ago. I was still in my coat, grocery bags in each hand. My back ached from lifting too much. And suddenly, I felt heavier than all the groceries combined. I peeked around the corner. She didn't see me. She was sitting at the kitchen island, her legs crossed, her toenail polish chipped, a gold bracelet jangling against the glass as she gestured to the realtor standing across from her. Yes, realtor. I just think an open-concept kitchen would really brighten the place. These cabinets are so grandma, Clara said, scrunching her nose like the smell of the roast I had slow-cooked last week still lingered. The realtor chuckled politely. Well, it has good bones. Definitely potential. That was when my son, Jacob, walked in. My only child. Tall like his father, but paler, thinner. He tucked his phone into his pocket and glanced between them. You sure she's on board with selling? He asked, half joking, half worried. Clara rolled her eyes. She's tired. She'll love the condo I picked. One floor, no yard work, peace and quiet. She should be thanking us. They clinked glasses. I didn't walk in. I didn't say a word. I turned around, groceries still in hand, and quietly stepped back out the front door. I sat in my car for a long time after that. Not crying. Not yelling. Just staring at the dashboard while the eggs warmed in the trunk. They were trying to sell my house. Not just any house, my house. The one Arthur and I had built room by room with our own hands. The house where I taught Jacob how to ride his bike on the driveway, where I nursed Arthur through chemo, where the maple tree in the backyard still had the initials A+M carved in bark so deep, it scarred. And now they were calling it a space with potential. Clara called me a guest. In my own home. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bring myself to lie down in the master bedroom. Not with Arthur's side so empty, not with the sound of Clara's laughter still echoing in my ears. I sat on the edge of the twin mattress, hands folded in my lap, staring at the beige wallpaper we'd always meant to replace. My palms were sweating. My jaw clenched tight. It wasn't just disrespect. It wasn't just entitlement. It was erasure. Clara had never liked that this was my house. From the very beginning, when she moved in temporarily after the wedding while she and Jacob figured things out, she would suggest little changes. A new shower curtain, different throw pillows, rearranged furniture. At first, I welcomed it. I wanted her to feel at home. I told myself it was generous of me to share my space. But somewhere along the line, my generosity became invisibility. I started getting invited to my own dinners. Oh, we're having friends over Friday. Hope that's okay, Margaret. I stopped correcting her after a while. It was easier to go quiet than start a war over every little slight. Besides, Jacob always looked so uncomfortable when I pushed back. But this was war. They were planning to sell the house, without asking me. Behind my back. I opened my phone, scrolled to my saved contacts. My finger hovered over one name, Anita Lerner, estate attorney. Arthur and I had updated our will just months before he passed. We'd been cautious, maybe even paranoid, because Arthur was a man who believed in preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. I never had to use that will beyond the funeral paperwork. But now I wanted to know exactly what my rights were. Because if they thought I was going to roll over and quietly sign my name on a dotted line like I didn't matter, like I was already dead, they didn't know who they were dealing with. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen with purpose. Clara was standing at the sink in her robe, sipping green juice, flipping through her phone. Oh, hey, Margaret, she said, glancing up. We're doing brunch Sunday with some of Jacob's coworkers. Hope that's okay. I smiled. Oh, I wouldn't worry about brunch just yet, I said sweetly. We'll need to reschedule. I have a meeting with a lawyer. Her head jerked up. Lawyer? Yes, I said, pulling the eggs from the fridge and setting them on the counter with a satisfying clink. We're going to talk about who actually owns this house. And then I cracked the first egg like a starter's pistol. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I cracked 3 eggs into a cold skillet, not because I was hungry, but because my hands needed something to do. The yolks shimmered against the pan like tiny suns, fragile and waiting to break. Clara stood behind me, frozen. The robe she wore still had a price tag thread dangling from the hem.
Of course it did.
She always returned things after photos were taken. A lawyer, she echoed, her voice trying to sound casual. But her fingers clenched the stem of her juice glass just a little too tight. Yes, I said, calmly whisking. Estate law. Property rights. All the things you should have asked me about before calling a realtor to tour my house while I was out buying groceries. She blinked. Margaret, you're being dramatic. It's just, we thought it was time.
We?
I asked, not even turning around. Jacob and I, she said, and now her voice turned soft, coated in sugar. The kind of tone she used when trying to manipulate someone into giving her something they hadn't agreed to. We just want what's best for everyone. I set the whisk down, turned to face her, and folded my arms. No, Clara. You want what's easiest for you. But I didn't raise a son, bury a husband, and hold this house together for 30 years to be pushed out like a tenant on borrowed time. She exhaled loudly through her nose, as if I were the unreasonable one. We're just trying to help. You don't even use half the house anymore. It's too big for you. Think about it. Smaller place, less maintenance, more comfort. I took a step closer and looked her straight in the eyes. Comfort, I repeated. You mean silence. You mean distance. You mean a smaller life. One that doesn't remind you who this home really belongs to. She shifted uncomfortably, her smile thinning. Don't take this so personally, Margaret. Oh, I assure you, I said. It's not personal. It's legal now. Just then, Jacob walked in from the back porch, still in his work slacks and a wrinkled dress shirt, unshaven and distracted. Morning, Mom, he said, giving me a weak smile before looking at Clara. Everything okay? She opened her mouth, but I cut in. Jacob, were you planning to tell me that you and Clara are trying to sell the house? He froze mid-step. A pause that lasted just a beat too long. And that silence? That was my answer. We were going to talk to you, he said carefully. It's not what you think. It never is, I replied. Until the paperwork's already signed and I'm standing on a welcome mat in a condo I didn't choose. Mom, come on. It's not like that, he said, holding up his hands. We were just getting a feel for options. You've been looking tired lately. We thought. No, I said firmly, the words slicing through the kitchen like a clean cut. You assumed. And you planned. Behind my back. And you let Clara refer to me as a guest in my own home. His head dropped. Clara's mouth opened like she was ready to deny it, but she didn't. Because we both knew I'd heard her say it. I'll be meeting with Anita Lerner tomorrow morning, I said. She handled the trust and title transfer after your father passed. And Jacob, unless she tells me otherwise, I have every right to keep this house, lock every door, and change every code. Mom. You can call me Mom all you want, I said. But you stopped acting like a son the minute you put a for sale sign in my front yard without asking me first. With that, I picked up my coffee mug and walked out of the kitchen. My hands weren't shaking this time. In fact, they felt steadier than they had in months. Upstairs, I opened the file cabinet in my room. I pulled out the manila envelope labeled Arthur, Property and Title. His handwriting was on the front, blocky and neat. The man had been meticulous. And thank God for that. Inside was everything. Our joint title from when we first bought the house, the deed transfer into my name, and a copy of the updated trust dated just 3 months before Arthur passed away. He'd left the house to me. Fully. Solely. Without condition. And they hadn't even bothered to check. They thought I'd be too polite to fight back. That I'd feel guilty. That I'd confuse their manipulation with care. They forgot I was raised by a woman who marched in protests before she could vote, who taught me how to sew a hem and read a contract in the same afternoon. They forgot I survived 37 years of marriage, chemotherapy nights, grief, loneliness, and now they wanted to corner me with brunch plans and passive-aggressive comments?
No.
Not today. Not anymore. That night, I didn't eat dinner with them. I sat in my garden, the one Arthur and I built together when Jacob was still in middle school. The roses were blooming late this year, petals opening like quiet applause. I sipped tea and thought about what came next. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't plead. I'd prepare, like Arthur taught me. And when I was done, they'd wish they had simply asked nicely. Anita Lerner's office hadn't changed in the 10 years since Arthur and I first walked in to update our will. Same heavy oak desk. Same framed degrees lining the walls like trophies. Same peppermint bowl on the corner of the filing cabinet that only she ever touched. Margaret Whitmore, Anita said as she stood and offered her hand with that sharp, efficient smile of hers. You look well. But I can tell by the urgency in your voice yesterday, this isn't just a social call. I smiled thinly. You could say that. We sat down. I pulled a thick folder from my bag and slid it across the desk. She didn't even flinch at the weight of it. I believe I need legal confirmation that my house belongs solely to me, I said, calm but firm. My son and his wife have been making plans. Behind my back. She opened the file, adjusted her glasses, and flipped through the copies I had brought. Arthur's will, the deed, the updated trust. Her eyes scanned fast, like she already knew most of what she'd find but was double-checking for the sake of formality. You're right, she said after a moment. Your husband transferred the title into your name entirely before he passed. You are the sole legal owner. They can't sell, transfer, or borrow against the property without your written consent. I nodded once. I thought so, I said. But I need more than a hunch. I need protection. Legal clarity. If they've already contacted a realtor, it means they're serious. Anita leaned back and tapped her pen against the desk. I can file a notice of interest and property freeze through the county clerk, she said. It'll block any attempt to list or modify the title without your signature. Anyone trying to transact anything on the property will get flagged immediately. Do it, I said. As soon as possible. Anita paused, then reached for a separate drawer on her right. She pulled out a small sealed envelope. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting on it. Arthur's. To Margaret. Open if she's here alone. My hands went cold. I wasn't sure if I'd ever have to give this to you, Anita said gently. Arthur gave it to me just after he finalized the trust. He said he wanted it kept private, just in case. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for it. I held it in my lap for a moment. It felt heavier than paper should. I opened it. Inside was a single letter, handwritten in Arthur's familiar, careful script. Not a copy. The original. And there, in a tone I hadn't heard since before he got sick, was my husband's voice. Maggie, if you're reading this, it means you're sitting in Anita's office alone. Which also means something has gone wrong. I didn't want to plant doubt in you while I was alive. You were grieving enough. But I saw it coming, in bits and pieces. Clara is smart. But she's also strategic. And Jacob, God help me, he's always wanted to keep the peace more than protect what's right. I saw the way she talked about the house when she thought I wasn't listening. The way she joked about how you'd want something smaller soon and how young families need space more than widows. That's why I made sure everything went to you. You've earned every nail and brick in that place. I wanted you to have the power to decide what's next, not them.
Don't let them wear you down, Maggie.
Don't let them guilt you. And whatever you do, don't underestimate her. She's not trying to help. She's trying to replace you. With love. Arthur. I didn't realize I was crying until I blinked and a tear hit the bottom edge of the envelope. Anita stayed silent, letting me breathe, letting me feel it. Arthur had known. Not just suspected.
Known.
I folded the letter carefully, like it was made of silk, and tucked it back into my purse. They think I'll give up, I said. They think I'll be too tired to fight. Anita leaned forward. You won't, she said. Because Arthur planned for this. And because you're not the kind of woman who walks away from her own legacy. She handed me a clipboard with the documents authorizing the notice of interest and title block. I signed without hesitation. And one more thing, she said as she reached into her drawer again. You mentioned they may have contacted a realtor. If they attempt to forge anything, file a false claim of power of attorney, or coerce a signature from you, I want you to call me immediately. I will, I said. But I have a feeling they'll back off once they realize the house is locked down. She raised an eyebrow. You're not underestimating her, are you? I smiled slightly. Not anymore. As I walked out into the sunlight, something shifted in me. Grief had dulled my senses for months after Arthur died. But this wasn't grief. This was clarity. The kind of clarity Arthur had carried quietly, the kind that saw through charm and smiled politely while building a wall of protection behind closed doors. When I got home, Jacob and Clara were in the backyard again, laughing with the same realtor I'd seen before, pointing to the maple tree. Clara was mid-sentence, something about what a lovely open-air brunch space this would be, when I stepped onto the porch. I wouldn't waste your time, I said loudly. The house isn't for sale, and it won't be. Clara turned. Her face dropped. Jacob stood slowly. What did you do? She asked. What Arthur already did, I replied. And what I should have done weeks ago. She took a step forward. You don't have to make this difficult, Margaret. No, I said with a smile. I don't, because it's already handled. And then I closed the porch door behind me, went inside, and called Elena, the woman who used to clean my house every Thursday for over a decade and who knew everything that happened within these walls. Because I had a new plan. And Clara? She was about to learn what it really meant to push the wrong woman too far. Elena arrived at my house just after 4 p.m., wearing the same denim jacket she used to hang on the hallway hook every Thursday for nearly 15 years. She didn't ask questions when I called, just said, I'll be there in an hour, like she already knew something wasn't right. We hugged at the door, but only briefly. Her hands were already twitching with that same nervous energy I remembered from back when she'd paced the living room if the floors hadn't dried properly. I saw them in the backyard when I pulled up, she said, pulling her tote bag onto the kitchen counter. They don't look worried. I poured us both tea. They should be, I said flatly. Elena nodded, then gave me a long look. You're not here just to talk. No, I admitted. I need your help. She tilted her head. You remember Clara's little home office setup in the guest bedroom? Of course, she said. The one she called her consultation corner, even though all she did was shop online and email. I nodded. I want to see what's in those drawers. Elena blinked. You think she's hiding something? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out Arthur's letter, the one Anita had given me. I handed it to her silently. She read it with the same furrowed brow she always got when Jacob brought home confusing math homework as a boy. When she finished, she looked up at me with eyes that burned. He knew, she said softly. I nodded. He saw it. And now I need to see everything she thought I wouldn't. Elena rolled up her sleeves. Let's go. We moved through the hallway quietly, even though the windows were open and laughter from the backyard floated in like distant music from a party we weren't invited to. When we stepped into the guest bedroom, my guest bedroom, now overtaken by Clara's consultation corner, I was struck by how deeply she'd tried to make it hers. Vanity mirror, designer chair, candles labeled with words like Zen and power in gold foil. But the desk, Arthur's old writing desk, was still there. She'd taken it over without ever asking. And she'd left it unlocked. That was her first mistake. Elena pulled open the middle drawer. Inside were receipts, printouts, sticky notes, and a folder labeled Finances, M and J. Elena handed it to me. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. There were plans for renovations, budget spreadsheets, rough sketches, and even contractor estimates totaling nearly $87,000. New cabinets, backyard expansion, home office remodel, all signed with Margaret's approval pending at the bottom. Only I'd never seen any of these documents. They were getting ready to flip the house, I whispered, while I was still living in it. Elena shook her head. They were betting on you folding. Or dying. I turned the page. Then froze. Tucked behind the estimates was a scanned document. A power of attorney form. Forged. Sloppy, too. The signature was close, but not mine. And worst of all, it was dated 6 months ago. This is illegal, I whispered. They tried to grant themselves authority over me without ever telling me. Elena leaned in close. They're playing a long game. This isn't just about the house. They're positioning for everything. Bank access. Medical decisions. Control. She nodded grimly. It's all here. I stood up so quickly the chair legs scraped across the hardwood. This isn't about protecting what's mine anymore, I said. This is about proving what they've already done. I took photos of every page, back and front, then slipped the originals back exactly where we'd found them. Elena raised an eyebrow. You're not taking them? I shook my head.
No.
If I take them, they'll know I know. If I leave them, they'll keep digging their own grave. I just needed evidence. Elena gave a short laugh. Now that's the Maggie I remember. We stepped back into the hallway just as the back door opened downstairs. Clara's voice rang out like a bell dipped in venom. Honestly, Margaret's been acting weird lately, she said, not knowing we were upstairs. I think she's showing signs. Forgetting things. I've started documenting just in case. You know, for future decisions. Elena looked at me. I didn't flinch. Because I was ready now. Let her spin her web. Let her call me forgetful and tired. I had her forged power of attorney saved in 2 places. I had her renovation plans, the pending contractor quotes, and her initials marked across lines she had no right to touch. Arthur had given me the house.
But now?
Clara had given me the war. And I was going to win it. Not by raising my voice, but by sharpening every quiet piece of evidence until it cut through her entire plan. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. Not fancy.
Not showy.
Just clean slacks, Arthur's old navy cardigan, and the pair of sensible shoes I wore to the last zoning meeting when they tried to put a cell tower behind the school. I'd won that one with nothing but a binder and a 3-minute statement. This would be easier. Clara had made the mistake of assuming I didn't know how to play defense. But Arthur? He taught me chess. And the first thing he told me was this. A queen doesn't shout. She moves silently and changes the entire board. At 9 a.m. sharp, I returned to Anita Lerner's office with Elena by my side and every photo from Clara's desk printed, time-stamped, and labeled. I handed them over with calm hands. Anita flipped through the stack, pausing only once, at the forged power of attorney.
She didn't gasp. She didn't blink.
She just nodded once and said, "That's felony-level fraud." I nodded back. I don't want to press charges. Not yet. Anita looked up. Then what do you want? I leaned forward slightly. I want a letter. Not a threat. Not a warning. A legal notice. I want Clara to know that I know. And I want her to sweat, without giving her room to retaliate. Anita smiled for the first time that day. A chess move, she said. Exactly, I replied. Within an hour, the letter was drafted, reviewed, and printed on thick, white legal paper that smelled like strategy. It was addressed jointly to Clara and Jacob. This letter serves as formal notification that any legal attempt to exercise power of attorney over Margaret Whitmore will be met with immediate criminal investigation. The attached documentation includes evidence of a falsified POA form signed without the principal's consent. You are hereby instructed to cease and desist from any real estate or financial negotiations concerning Mrs. Whitmore's estate or property. Any violation of this instruction will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. I read it once, then signed at the bottom. Anita slid it into an envelope, sealed it, and handed it to me. You can deliver it in person, she said, or we can have it mailed certified. Oh, I said, sliding the envelope into my purse. I'm going to hand it to her myself. I didn't go straight home. I went to the bank, a place Clara clearly assumed I no longer visited. Kelsey, the same branch manager who helped me open my trust accounts last year, waved me over when she saw me. I need to move everything, I said, out of the joint family trust and into my personal name. Solo access. Solo signatures. Kelsey blinked. You and your son are both on this account. Not for long, I said, handing her the new documents Anita had prepared. Power of attorney is revoked. I've enclosed proof of attempted forgery. Anita Lerner will back every word. Kelsey took the papers, scanned them, then tapped rapidly at her keyboard. Do you want to close the existing account completely? I nodded. Freeze it. Today. By the time I left the bank, every dollar that Clara thought she was planning around had slipped quietly out from under her. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, Clara was standing on the porch with her phone, giggling over a call with someone named Amanda from staging.
She paused when she saw me.
Gave me that fake sweet smile I'd seen too many times. How was your little outing? She asked, voice thick with condescension. I walked past her without stopping, opened the front door, and said over my shoulder, You've got mail. Then I set the sealed envelope down on the foyer table and walked into the kitchen without another word. 5 minutes later, I heard her yell. Not scream, yet. Just the kind of yell someone lets out when they've been slapped, without warning. Jacob came down from upstairs as I poured myself some iced tea. Mom, what's going on? He asked, panic blooming behind his eyes. I handed him a second copy of the letter I'd printed just for him. You might want to read that before answering, I said. He skimmed it quickly, then looked up pale. Mom, this isn't what you think. Clara just thought. Stop, I said. This isn't about what she thought. It's about what she forged. You let her sign my name. You let her draw up plans for a house that isn't hers. And you stood there in silence while she painted me as senile behind my back. Jacob blinked. You went through her desk? I went through my desk, I said. Arthur's desk. In my house. He deflated then, right there in the kitchen, like someone let all the air out of him with one pinprick of truth. I didn't think it would go that far, he muttered. That's the problem, I replied. You never think. You just let her decide, and then you carry the guilt like it absolves you. From the hallway, Clara's voice pierced the air like a siren. This is absurd. You're bluffing. I stepped out, calm as sunrise. Then call your lawyer, I said. See if he thinks the forged POA form you printed and labeled Margaret's pending signature is a bluff. She froze. Because we both knew she wouldn't. She wouldn't dare. And then, before she could fire back, I said the line I'd been waiting to deliver for days. By the way, I've scheduled the locksmith for Tuesday. Your keys will no longer work after 9 a.m. You'll receive a certified eviction notice by Friday. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. But no words came. I walked upstairs, each step slow and deliberate. By the time I closed my bedroom door, I heard nothing but silence downstairs. Heavy, uncertain silence. The kind that follows a queen's first move. The house was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Like the kind of stillness that feels staged, a silence soaked in strategy. I stayed in my room, sipping chamomile tea, reviewing the same documents for the 100th time. The forged POA. The renovation quotes. Arthur's letter. Anita's legal notice. I should have felt powerful, victorious even. But something tugged at the edge of my thoughts, a frayed thread I hadn't pulled yet. Something about Clara's confidence, her certainty that Jacob would inherit everything eventually. It didn't quite add up. Arthur's will had been airtight. I remembered it vividly. Or, I thought I did. At 10:43 p.m., I heard a door shut downstairs. Quiet. Sneaky. Then Jacob's voice. Low and urgent.
No, not tonight.
She's not asleep yet.
A pause.
Then Clara's sharper whisper. She can't evict us. She'll crack. She always folds. She doesn't want a scandal. Another pause. Then Jacob again. I don't know if we can hide it anymore. She found too much already. Silence. Then footsteps up the stairs. The guest room door creaked. I waited until I heard the soft click of it locking. Then I did what any widow with nothing left to lose would do. I went back to the desk. Not to the obvious drawers. Those had been booby-trapped with just enough documents to distract. No, I tapped underneath. Arthur's desk had a false bottom in the bottom left drawer. He'd installed it after his first surgery, back when he started getting paranoid about tax records and bank slips. He used to say, "Even the people you trust the most deserve a few shadows." My fingers slipped into the groove and popped it open. One thick envelope, labeled, "Margaret, open only if Jacob betrays you." My heart cracked before I even read the first word. Inside was a handwritten letter and a printed amendment to Arthur's original will. Maggie, if you're reading this, then I guess Jacob turned out to be the man I feared he might. Not cruel, just weak. And when weakness gets paired with ambition, or a woman like Clara, it becomes dangerous. I kept something from you. One thing. Because I thought it would never come to this. I paused, bracing myself. There was another will, one I wrote before the cancer came back. In it, I left Jacob a portion of the house. Not much. Just enough to keep him involved. But when I saw how Clara began treating you, when she made you feel small in your own home, I rewrote it. Gave you everything. The problem is, I never destroyed the old one. I told Anita to lock it away, just in case we needed to prove motive someday. If Jacob or Clara ever try to claim the house, if they ever act like they're entitled, use this. Prove it wasn't a misunderstanding.
It was a choice.
A correction. And Maggie, don't let them gaslight you into shrinking again. Love always, Arthur. I pressed the letter to my chest and sat back on the edge of the bed. The kind of slow collapse that only happens when a memory strikes harder than any insult. So Arthur had feared this. He'd seen the fault lines forming and prepared for the aftershocks. But what shook me more was the subtle betrayal. He hadn't told me. He'd carried that burden, that secret rewrite, all alone, protecting me by not trusting me. I didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. Maybe both. The next morning, I called Anita before the sun came up. I found a copy of the original will, I said. Arthur gave Jacob a stake, but he revoked it later. There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. I know, she said quietly. Arthur told me not to mention it unless you found out on your own. My stomach sank. And the old copy? In my archive, she replied. But it's sealed. And technically void. But it proves intent, I said.
Yes.
It shows Arthur changed his mind. And if this ever goes to court, that document could be your shield and sword. I thanked her and hung up. For the first time in days, I didn't feel rage or fear. I felt resolve. It was time to clear the house, not just of lies, but of ghosts. By noon, I'd boxed up every family photo from the living room, every school picture, every graduation frame, every photo from Jacob and Clara's wedding. Not out of bitterness. Out of peace. Out of boundaries. When Clara came downstairs, she saw the empty wall first. She froze. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Taking back what's mine," I replied, calmly stacking the frames into a tote. "You're erasing us?" I looked at her, really looked. Hair perfectly curled. Skin glowing from some overpriced serum. And eyes, frantic behind the smugness. "You erased me the day you referred to me as a guest, Clara." She scoffed, defensive now. "You're just overreacting. This whole thing is just a misunderstanding." I handed her a photocopy of Arthur's rewritten will.
No, I said.
This was Arthur's last correction. And I'm making sure it stands. She stared at the paper, her confidence wavering. "You think this makes you the victim?" "No," I said. "I think this makes me the owner. And you, the intruder." Later that night, Jacob knocked on my door. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" he asked.
I didn't invite him in.
I just stepped outside with him and stood beneath the porch light. "I found the old will," he said, voice low. "I knew about it. I thought if we just waited, maybe you'd forget things. Maybe you'd want help." "You forged a legal document, Jacob." I didn't sign it, he whispered. That was Clara. And you let her. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: regret. Raw and real. I'm sorry, Mom, but I shook my head. You're sorry you got caught. Not that it happened. He didn't argue. He just turned and walked into the night. Clara always thrived in three places: anywhere with cameras, catered cocktails, and people too polite to call her out. So when I learned she was hosting a charity luncheon on Saturday for young women in real estate, using my backyard as the venue, I didn't hesitate. I RSVP'd through her assistant, under a different name, E. Whitmore, for Eleanor, my grandmother. I figured Clara wouldn't read the list closely. She was too busy curating her brand to notice the small cracks forming under her feet. And I wasn't just coming to crash her party. I was coming to end the performance. Saturday arrived like a dress rehearsal. The catering staff showed up at 9 a.m. The florists came with delicate white peonies and gold-trimmed name cards. And Clara? She floated around in a flowing cream jumpsuit and designer heels, giving orders like a woman who thought nothing could touch her. Not lawsuits, not eviction notices, not forged documents. Jacob trailed behind her, clearly uneasy, but obedient. The house buzzed with staged perfection. Until I walked in, wearing Arthur's old leather watch, a navy dress that hit just below the knee, and a silk scarf he'd once bought me in Paris. The one I hadn't worn in years because it made me feel too bold. Today, bold was exactly the point. When I stepped into the yard, heads turned. Not immediately, but gradually. One by one, women in blazers and stilettos lowered their glasses and glanced toward the woman they couldn't quite place. Clara froze mid-laugh when she saw me. Her mouth stayed open a second too long. "Margaret," she said, smiling tight. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting women in real estate," I replied. "After all, I own the house we're standing in." The group chuckled, not cruelly but curiously. Some of them were already whispering. Clara's eyes darted to Jacob, but he was frozen. I stepped toward the podium she had set up by the fountain. "Would you mind if I said a few words?" I asked sweetly. She hesitated. "Actually, this is a private." But the microphone was already in my hand. The crowd quieted. I looked at them, 40 or so ambitious young women in suits too tight and heels too high, the kind Clara collected like trophies. "I promise not to take much of your time," I began. But I thought today was the perfect moment to talk about ownership. Not just of property, but of truth. Clara shifted behind me. Her smile had hardened. "I bought this home with my husband 32 years ago. We built it from nothing. I raised my son here, buried my husband from here. This house is more than brick and beams. It's a witness to a life lived fully, imperfectly, and with love." I paused, scanning their faces. "And recently, someone in this very yard tried to sell it out from under me. Behind my back. Using a forged signature and a fake power of attorney." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Clara stepped forward. "Margaret, I really think—" "I'm not finished," I said calmly into the mic, "because this isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's ever been told to step aside. Every woman who's been spoken over, underestimated, erased quietly." Some of the women nodded. A few even clapped. "I was called a guest in my own home," I said, "by the woman who married my son, who now stands here, smiling at you like she built something. But let me be clear, she didn't build anything. She borrowed it, and now she's being asked to leave." The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. And Clara? She stepped back. Her hands trembled, barely hiding it by adjusting her earring. I handed the mic to the stunned coordinator next to me. "I wish you all well," I said, turning to the crowd. "Own your homes. Own your power. But never try to own someone else's story." Then I walked straight past Clara without looking at her, without giving her the dignity of eye contact. Because this wasn't a scene. This was conclusion. Back inside, I found Jacob sitting on the stairs, elbows on his knees. He looked like a man unraveling slowly, not with a bang, but with the quiet realization that the house of cards he'd helped build was collapsing. She's furious, he said. So am I replied, walking past him. He stood. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Because I knew you'd try to stop me. I might have. I stopped at the base of the stairs and turned to him. Jacob, you once asked me why I always forgive so easily. He nodded slowly. I used to think it was because I was soft, I said. But now I know it's because I wanted to be loved more than I wanted to be right. His eyes welled up. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. Then start proving it, I said. And I climbed the stairs, one slow step at a time, as Clara's party unraveled behind me, her polished mask cracking beneath the weight of one unexpected truth. She didn't own the narrative anymore. I did. The eviction notice was clear. They had until 10 a.m. Saturday to be fully out. Not packed.
Gone.
Jacob hadn't argued when the sheriff's department hand-delivered the final notice 2 weeks prior. He hadn't pleaded, hadn't called, just signed for it with trembling hands and disappeared back inside like a man waiting for a storm to pass. But Clara? Clara waited until the day of to launch one last play. Saturday morning, I pulled into my own driveway at 9:30 a.m. sharp, dressed like I had somewhere better to be, which I did. Anywhere but here. But I had to see it through. I needed to witness it. The front gate was locked. That was the first clue. The second was the smug silence. The music had been turned off. No boxes on the lawn. No moving truck in the driveway. Just stillness. Like the calm before a particularly dramatic tantrum. I tried the front door.
Locked.
I rang the bell. No answer. I stepped back and looked up, just in time to see Clara appear at the upstairs window, phone in hand, holding a ceramic coffee mug like she was at a spa.
She didn't wave.
She just smiled. The sheriff arrived at 9:58 a.m. with a clipboard and mirrored sunglasses. Deputy Harlow. Professional. Unmoved. They're still inside, he asked. Locked the gate. Changed the locks. Ignore the certified notice, I said. He whistled softly through his teeth. That's 3 violations already. I nodded. I have legal documents, a locksmith scheduled, and an attorney on standby. He gave me a thumbs up. Then let's do this. He knocked once. Firm. Authoritative. Sheriff's Department. This property is no longer legally yours. You are in active violation of a court order. Open the door, or we will enter. Clara's voice floated through the window like a bad soap opera. This is harassment. I'm making a video. Deputy Harlow turned to me. She really doing this? Oh yes, I said. She thinks being loud equals being right. He stepped aside for the locksmith, who worked fast. 2 clicks, 1 twist, and the door swung open at 10:04 a.m. The house smelled like expensive candles and desperation. Clara stood at the top of the stairs, now holding a phone and a selfie ring light. This is elder abuse, she shouted into the camera. This is what betrayal looks like. Deputy Harlow remained unfazed. Ma'am, your rights are not being violated. Your tenancy has been revoked. Your personal items will be packed and stored as per statute. You can't throw us out like dogs, she shrieked. Behind her, Jacob appeared, carrying a duffel bag and 2 boxes. Eyes sunken. Face red. Clara, he said quietly. Stop. Please. She spun on him like a viper. You said she'd fold. You said she couldn't handle the drama. I was wrong. He walked down the stairs, past her, and paused next to me. I tried to warn her, he muttered. She wouldn't listen. She never listens, I replied. He didn't look at me again. Just stepped outside and kept walking, down the path, down the street, to where his car waited, leaving her behind. For the first time, Clara stood frozen, halfway down the stairs now. Without Jacob beside her, her fire dimmed. I gave him everything, she whispered. I fixed his teeth. I built his image. You broke his spine, I said, and tried to steal my home. She tried to laugh, but it cracked. I handed her a letter. Typed, notarized, final. Official notice of financial severance. You won't get a dime from the trust, I said. Arthur made sure of it. She stared at the paper like it had burned her fingers. Then she did what she always did when cornered.
She lied.
Everyone's going to hear about this, she spat. I'll post it everywhere. I'll tell them you threw me out with nothing. Good, I said. Tell the whole world how you forged a legal document and locked the real homeowner out of her own house. I'll be sure to comment. Deputy Harlow stepped between us. That's enough. Ma'am, you have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings. The rest will be inventoried and boxed for pickup. I'm calling my lawyer. Do that, he said, flipping a page on his clipboard. But I'd advise you to focus on packing while you still have control over what ends up in the boxes. I stepped outside as movers hired by the sheriff's department began loading Clara's belongings into neatly labeled bins. Vanity chair, fake fiddle leaf fig plant, ring light, all the trappings of someone who thought image could outrun truth. Elena pulled up just as the last bin was sealed. She stepped out with iced coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. I heard she changed the locks, Elena said. She changed the locks on me, I replied, laughing. Imagine that. Elena grinned. So, what now? I looked back at the house, my house, and said, now we change the locks back. The house was quiet again, not the kind of quiet that follows grief or betrayal, that had come and gone in its own season. This was a lighter silence.
Clean.
Rested, like the exhale after a long-held breath. I walked barefoot through the hall that morning, sun spilling through the kitchen windows, the smell of orange peels and fresh coffee trailing behind me. The hardwood floor creaked just the way it used to before Clara's rugs tried to cover its imperfections. I left them all rolled up on the curb 3 days ago. Let someone else take the pretense. Elena stopped by later with tulips and a crooked smile. You look taller, she said, setting the vase on the counter. I feel taller, I replied. We sat at the breakfast nook, the one Clara once tried to convert into a coffee bar for her so-called clients, and talked about nonsense. Book clubs, tomatoes, whether or not lemon trees would survive in our climate. And then Elena pulled a yellow envelope from her tote bag. This came to the old P.O. box, she said, addressed in all caps, like a ransom note. I took it, recognized the handwriting immediately. Clara. The return address was a nondescript apartment complex across town. A bland, beige building near the freeway that didn't even have balconies. I opened it. Inside, one typed page. Single-spaced. Self-righteous. Margaret. I hope you're proud of what you've done. You've made yourself look like the victim while tearing apart your own family. Jacob is barely speaking. Our reputation is in tatters. I may have made mistakes, but at least I never turned my back on people who needed me. One day, when you're older and alone, I hope you realize what you've destroyed. Because it won't just be Jacob who's gone. It'll be your legacy. Enjoy your empty house. Clara. I read it once. Then again. Then laughed. Not bitterly, not cruelly. Just honestly. Elena raised an eyebrow. That good, huh? I handed it to her. She scanned it silently, snorted halfway through, and folded it back up with surgical precision. God, she really doesn't get it, she said. Still playing the victim after she forged your name and tried to sell your home. She thinks the house is the point, I said, sipping my tea. She doesn't realize it was never about square footage. It was about being seen, respected. Exactly, Elena said. And she hated that you never needed her permission to matter. We sat there for a moment, two women wrapped in shared understanding. Then I reached into the drawer, pulled out a pen, and wrote my own letter. Short, sharp, and final.
Clara.
Thank you for confirming everything I already knew. I haven't lost a family. I've reclaimed myself. And I'm not older and alone. I'm free. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore. Owner, survivor, woman you underestimated. I sealed it in a plain envelope and added one final flourish, a copy of the notarized deed, clipped to the back. Just in case she forgot whose name was on the title. Elena burst out laughing when I showed her.
Cold, she said.
I love it. That afternoon, I walked through the garden again. The roses were blooming louder this year, like they knew they had space again. I trimmed the dead petals, humming under my breath, a melody I hadn't thought of in years. I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. And for once, I didn't see a widow. I didn't see someone's mother or someone's burden. I saw me,
Whole.
standing, ready. 3 weeks after Clara's eviction, I stood in the center of the living room, sunlight pouring in through the open windows, no more blackout curtains dulling the air. The realtor I'd hired, Marcy, walked beside me with her clipboard. "You really want to sell?" she asked, glancing around at the polished floors, the gleaming kitchen, the garden blooming out back. I smiled.
No.
"I want to let it go. There's a difference." She nodded. "Full listing goes up Monday," she said. "I'll screen the buyers personally." I handed her a manila envelope with a handwritten note on top. No flippers. No influencers. Only families who see a home, not a transaction. She smirked. "You got it." That night, I lit a candle and finally went through the last of Arthur's boxes in the attic. Not legal papers. Not warnings. Just journals. Photos. Letters. One postcard from our honeymoon in San Luis Obispo that said, "You snore like a sailor. I love it. Let's never go back to normal life." I held that one close. I think he would have liked this ending. Me, standing on my own porch again. Me, writing the final chapter my way. The next morning, I took a walk past the old community garden. I hadn't been in months. They'd installed new benches, and the roses there, less dramatic than mine, but still lovely, had flourished. I found Elena already there, pruning tomato vines like she owned the place. "Morning, boss," she called out with a grin. I sat next to her and handed her a folded flyer. She opened it, squinted, then looked at me with wide eyes. "Margaret," she whispered. "You didn't." I did. The flyer read, "The Whitmore Fellowship for Women Starting Over. A grant for women 50+ starting small businesses, going back to school, or rebuilding after loss. First application window opens in October," I said, smiling. "Seed funding from the house sale. Ongoing support from a legal trust. And you, Elena, are my first advisory board member." Her eyes filled. "You're turning your pain into a parachute." I nodded. "And I'm done falling." She leaned over and hugged me tight. "I knew you weren't finished," she whispered. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail. This one, surprisingly, wasn't from Clara. It was from Lily, Jacob, and Clara's daughter. My granddaughter. She was 14 now. And somehow, despite the chaos, she'd found her way to a piece of lined paper and a postage stamp. "Dear Grandma, I'm sorry I haven't seen you. I don't understand everything that happened, but I miss you. Dad said I could write if I wanted. I remember when we planted those white flowers by the porch. You said I could name them, and I named them Victory. I hope they're still there. I hope you're okay. Love, Lily." I read it twice, then went out to the porch. The white lilies were still blooming.
Stubborn. Bright.
Glorious. I took a photo, printed it, and wrote back that same day. "Dear Lily, Victory is still here. And so am I. The house may be sold soon, but the garden lives on. Come visit anytime. No permission needed. Just bring your smile and maybe a little curiosity. I'll have tea and stories waiting. Love always, Grandma Margaret." The house went into escrow the following month. A newlywed couple from Colorado. A firefighter and a middle school teacher. No Instagram following. No plans to tear down the kitchen. Just a dream and 2 rescue dogs. They cried when I handed them the keys. Not from stress.
From joy.
That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. I moved into a small brick cottage closer to downtown. 2 bedrooms. 1 sunny kitchen window. No ghosts. On the first night in my new place, I unpacked the very last box. Inside were 3 things. Arthur's postcard, Lily's letter, and the photo I took of those stubborn, brilliant lilies on the porch. I hung it above my writing desk, not because I needed the memory, but because I wanted the reminder that even after storms, even after betrayal and rot and weeds, some things bloom stronger than before. Especially women who stop asking permission. She lost the house, the lies, and the weight of silence, but what she gained was far greater: freedom, truth, and a legacy on her own terms. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember their worth.